over 55 years, your source for agribusiness news and features from around the Southeast and across the country, focusing on one of the nation's top industries, agriculture. The Farm Monitor is produced by the Georgia Farm Bureau in association with Abraham Baldwin Agricultural College.
Well, the leaves are falling. In some areas, they are burning. It just feels like Thanksgiving. And as we do every week, all of us here at the show are giving thanks that you decided to tune into the Farm Monitor.
Yes, absolutely. And once again, we've got a great show for you. Coming up, soybeans in Georgia, you bet. And despite the odds stacked against them due to unexpected hurdles, producers are keeping this valuable crop thriving. Find out how. In the next 15 years, experts predict that 70% of land ownership will change hands, sparking uncertainty, especially for family farms. Coming up, we explore why succession planning is key to preserving a farm's legacy. Plus,
well, everybody, Ranger Net, coming up a little bit later, we're talking peanuts in South Georgia, how they're dug, harvested, and the aftermath of the recent hurricane. That and so much more starts right now on the Farm Monitor.
Nearly 4.5 billion bushels of U.S. soybeans are expected to be harvested in 2024, marking the second largest domestic yield in history. As Damon Jones reports, that production has extended into Georgia, where despite some dry weather, this year's crop is looking very strong.
While the Midwest might be king when it comes to soybean production, it is a crop that has a strong foothold here in Georgia, as the state is responsible for more than 8 million bushels a year. And that number might be even bigger in 2024, as production is expected to be up despite some difficult growing conditions.
I bet we went about probably 40-something days with no rain, but that could be worse too, because I got some buddies that's 7 or 8 miles away to crow flies from me right here that went about 2 months without no rain. So it could be worse, but it was a good growing season, other than we had to pump a lot of water. Light bills were higher, fuel bills were higher, but other than that, it was pretty good.
However, those dry conditions didn't extend into the harvest season, as heavy rains from Hurricanes Helene and Milton delayed growers from getting out into the fields. And with warmer than normal conditions sticking around, it's important to get harvest wrapped up as soon as possible.
I wish they was in the bin, because that's what can mess your beans up. When they stay wet and it's hot, they can germ and they can get, damage to them. But typically, like if it's a normal October, November, where it's, in the 40s at night and the 60s and 70s in the day, it's not as hot. They won't germ and go bad. So normally a bean can take a good bit more weather, but I need these in the bin with the weather we've been having. It's been a little too warm and a little too moist for the bean crop this year.
However, it's a delicate balancing act, as harvested beans have to be at a certain moisture content before they can be stored away in order to maximize their earning potential.
If you get too much moisture content in a bin, they'll go through a heat mold. I mean, it'll ruin your beans as far as seed quality for sure. But then end users, they want them dry. Beans dry at 13%. If you go in at 13.1, they start knocking money per bushel off. So it's very important when you're going to ADMs and your Cargills, you want moisture to be right, because if you mess around and have 14, 15% moisture on soybeans, they just dinged you a lot of money.
And more than 90% of these beans will be going towards seed for next year.
I grow those for Pioneer and like for mixing different varieties, but the seed beans are actually like, I'm growing seed stock. So what I'm growing, they'll come pick up out of my bins. I'll keep them, and they're actually cleaned and bagged and sold back to the farmer to grow for the next year.
You can bet Lord will be one of those farmers, as it's a crop he both enjoys growing and can get the most bang for his buck.
From the help standpoint, I mean, I can take one of them machines behind me and do what 3 of them roller pickers are doing today by itself. I mean, so you don't have near the help. I'm just rigged up to grow grain, so I like grain. I love combines. I'd rather run the combine any day than the cotton picker. It's a little more work in the middle of the summer than my cotton guy. They'll be, cotton will be up and they'll be watering, but it's just kind of what works for me and it's what I like to do, so that's just why I do it.
Reporting from Dudley, I'm Damon Jones for the Farm Monitor.
preserving a lifelong legacy is the ultimate goal of succession planning, especially for family farms. As retirement approaches for many farmers, the importance of this process has never been more critical. John Holcomb now with more from Floyd County.
According to experts, in the next 15 years, around 70% of land ownership is most likely to change hands as an aging generation starts to retire. That, of course, can be a catalyst for uncertainty, especially for the preservation of agricultural land and family farms, which is why having a succession plan can be so important.
In your lifetime, you typically accumulate stuff, and when you die, the idea is, where's your stuff going to go? Is it going to go to the people I care about and love, or what's going to happen to it? Is it going to end up in the hands of the government via taxes? Is it going to end up with somebody I don't care so much about? And so the process of estate planning puts documents in place that dispose of your stuff at the time of your death. And so in one sense, it's an insurance policy where you put the documents in place and you have the peace of mind of knowing that there is a plan for what is going to occur.
According to Bojo, the process doesn't have to be a difficult one. As he says, it's just a matter of asking and answering questions that are important to you and the legacy that's been created.
When you work hard your entire life, you have something of a legacy that you've created, and there are ways to preserve that legacy, and putting something into place, going through a plan, having questions asked and answered about what would happen if you were to pass away in a sudden disaster or live the rest of your days out. What's going to happen with your legacy? What have you created over all these years? What values do you hold that are important? Do you want your grandchildren, great-grandchildren to be on this land? Do you care whether your children keep this land or not? There's no wrong answer, but knowing the answers are important.
Bojo says the most important part of succession planning is being proactive, no matter how long the process takes. As he says, diligently working to think out a plan and communicating that to loved ones often makes the process easier for everyone.
It needs to be a natural conversation, not something that's forced. And so many times the patriarch or matriarch just needs to sit down and thoughtfully and prayerfully think, what do I want to do? What do I want to have happen after I die? And then part two to that would be communication. That's the key to the kingdom. It's, whether that's a formal sit down with everybody at Thanksgiving, or whether it's a one-on-one conversation with each child, there needs to be communication. But it all begins with just taking the time to proactively just think about what I want to do. And that could be a 6 month to a year, one whole season it may take. But there's no deadline or timeline. It's just taking the time that you need to take to get to where you want to go.
Reporting in Rome for the Farm Monitor, I'm John Holcomb.
Well, hey everybody, Ranger Nick coming up after the break. In the aftermath of Hurricane Helene, many farmers in South Georgia were using one of these. It's a peanut harvester. Coming up, we're talking digging, inverting, shaking, harvesting, all that and so much more after the break.
Hi, I'm Mallory Harvey. I'm from Appling County, and we farm cotton, peanuts, and then we've got 4 breeder houses with Pilgrim's Pride Poultry. As a young boy, I learned a lot from being around my grandfather and all the guys, the workers that come along the way, as far as learning from them and my granddad. And through the years, I've watched a lot of other successful farmers too around the area, and kind of watch how they farmed as well as my granddad, and tried to put that all together, and that's really how I started learning how to do what I do now. So I was actively involved with the Appling Leads program in our county, and we were asked to be able to go to a local pre-K and teach them about peanuts and what it takes to grow a peanut crop, and show them actual peanut plant. And so that's good for the youth that's disconnected from farming. As a young farmer, I do see a strong need in teaching the younger generation about farming and where their food comes from, because I believe there's a big disconnect and where our food comes from. And so it's very important for them to learn that and see the need for what we do as farmers. We deal with a lot of problems on the farm on a daily basis. I would say just trying to cure any kind of insect pressure that we may have, disease pressure, equipment teardowns, to weather-related problems. We can't control weather or our prices that we get on our crops. So that's something that we do the best that we can do and let the Lord do His work from there. I love farming because I get to be home every night with my family. I get to bring them up around farming and for them to be able to see what I seen growing up, and just hopefully being able to pass that down to the next generation.
Holding a juvenile Juro spider. Until next time, for the Farm Monitor, I'm Ranger Nick, reminding you, like I always do, that enthusiasm is contagious. Where you're looking high above a beautiful farm down in South Georgia, part of the UGA Tifton campus, and we're talking peanuts this month. Of course, I'm a nutty professor, and maybe I could say I'm hanging out with another one, Dr. Scott Tubbs. Hey, Doc.
Hey, Nick. Pleasure.
So glad to be with you today.
Yeah.
Cropping systems agronomist here at UGA College of Agricultural and Environmental Sciences. Doc, I'm looking at these plants. You're telling me they're peanut plants. I know we're at a peanut farm. I'm not seeing any peanuts. Where are these things? I believe you, but where are they?
So the cool thing about peanuts is they're actually called by genus and subspecies Arachis hypogea, and that hypogea part means under the earth. Okay. So under the gea. So these peanuts are actually growing under the ground. So this is the vegetation. This is the part of the plant that does the photosynthesizing, and the flowering actually occurs above ground. So the peanut flowers first, then sets a peg. The peg reaches down to the ground.
Like a root going into the ground?
It's kind of like that, yeah. So it reaches to the ground. Once it hits the ground, a pod starts to form and it swells. Once the pod forms and swells, then a kernel forms inside the pod.
And the kernel is what we love to eat. And I'm looking right over here, Doc. So here we have kernels inside of pods. I'm assuming they're in there. But look at what this looks like. Y'all, I thought to myself, so who is out here picking these peanut plants, flipping them over, and making them look like this? Is this done by hand?
Absolutely not. It used to be done by hand, but with a pitchfork before we went to mechanization. But nowadays, the commercial farming, the practices that we have to do in order to get through the amount of acreage that we have in the state of Georgia, and the state of Georgia has a lot of peanut acreage, we have to do most of this stuff by mechanization with tractors and farm implements.
All right, so what you're looking at there is the peanut plant in the ground. Then we have to come along and dig it up, shake it, and invert it. Flip it upside down, and it's laying on the ground. And then along comes Zach Cromer. Hey, Zach, good to see you today. So glad to be with you out here at Tifton campus, research professional, tractor extraordinaire driver, of course. Now, Zach, this machine, the harvester, now comes along and you have this row of inverted peanuts.
Right.
Then what?
So after the plants have dried down, we will come in with the peanut combine, and of course it'll be running, making a lot of noise. And these teeth on the front here will be rotating.
All right.
They'll pick the vines up and pull them into the machine. And once they get inside of there, there's a lot of drums that are rotating with teeth that are thrashing the plants, knocking the pods loose, and helping separate that vegetation material, the trash, all the bad stuff. It goes right out the back of the machine. There's cleaning fans that are blowing that lighter material out, and the heavier peanut pods are falling through the shaker pan and down into the air duct in the bottom, and they're blown right up into the basket.
So the basket on top, how much would that basket hold once those peanuts are ready?
And so that particular one probably holds around about a ton. You know, it varies between different models of machinery. Obviously, larger machines have a bigger basket. But this particular one, probably about a ton.
Okay, and then you're emptying that quite often, coming back out.
Yeah, so every so often when it's full, we're going to wherever the wagons are at, and we're dumping them on the wagons, and that way they can be transported to the buying facilities.
Interesting. And one of the things that might be blowing out of the back, something very, very light, is something called a pop. Literally, it pops. This is the hull that's empty. No little peanuts inside of there. I want to talk next with Scott about what does that mean? Why didn't this little hull have anything in it? What can we do as a farmer to deal with that? So let's go there next. Doc, I'm going to open this up. This thing, so nothing inside, it's like a magic trick. What little guy? Nothing inside, but it has a particular color, you say, that is interesting to you.
That's right. So when we're looking at this is the endocarp layer. The white that you see there is the endocarp layer, and that's because the kernel that didn't form, as you see in this one, the kernel was there, but it never fully formed. And that's a function of it not getting enough calcium, which is what causes that pop to occur. And that calcium not getting into the hull is also a function of water. So the water has to move the calcium into the hull to form the kernel and cause it to mature.
Interesting.
And when we're talking about maturity, this is what it should look like when we have a fully mature kernel inside. This is a transition. So peanut is an indeterminate crop, so it's going to form kernels over the course of time. And this one has a little bit more white with some brown in it. Okay. And then a more mature peanut has a fully dark brown to black color, and we even start to see that impression that occurs on the kernel as it forces its way onto the hull.
Now, there was a guide that was created here at the University of Georgia to look at those colors, and that's where, look, Zach is back with us modeling this maturity board, the peanut maturity board. Doc, talk to us about this and these colors.
Sure. So the maturity profile board is essentially taking the mesocarp layer. So when we have these hulls, a farmer brings in a sample to the county agent office, and the county agents are trained in how to put these on the board correctly. So they actually use a pressure washer to slough off the outer layer of the hull, and it exposes the mesocarp layer, which is an in-between layer between the exocarp and the endocarp. Okay. That mesocarp layer will change color with its maturity. And that's going to be what this maturity profile board shows as it progresses from a white class to a yellow class, a yellow to a light orange, a darker orange, a brown, and eventually a black. So as peanuts move further along in maturity, they're going to have more black in their mesocarp layer. Finding the right maturity to determine the optimum time to dig is going to affect the farmer's bottom line in making their profit.
And that timing is so critical, and we've got to think about that. And I guess that sums it up in a nutshell. Doc, thank you so much for today, for hanging out. Zach, thank you so much for spending time with us. Y'all know what to do. While you're watching TV, looking things up online more about peanuts and making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, maybe with Georgia peanuts or so, check out the Farm Monitor Facebook page, check out the Ranger Nick Facebook page. And until next time, as we always say, I'm Ranger Nick, reminding you that enthusiasm is contagious. Holding a juvenile Juro spider. Until next time, for the Farm Monitor, I'm Ranger Nick, reminding you, like I always do, that enthusiasm is contagious.
Well, you heard Nick mention Hurricane Helene. On that note, Georgia's top ag organizations, including Georgia Farm Bureau, have launched a relief fund for farmers impacted by Helene. Donations have already exceeded $1 million, with the bar now set at $1.5 million. To donate, scan the QR code on your screen or visit gfb.org/hurricane relief for more info. All contributions are tax deductible.
Well, maple trees are tough, but they're not immune to cold damage. Up next, Paul Pugliese shares tips on how to protect your trees from winter stress.
Common name privet, seen most often as Chinese privet. It grows between 20 to 30 feet tall with small, waxy, oval-shaped leaves on either side of the stem. This is another one planted as an ornamental that has easily spread and may be difficult to eradicate. Its seeds are frequently scattered by birds throughout lowland forest edges, forming dense thickets.
Don't contribute to the spread of privet.
Protect our native species by keeping Georgia's #1 invasive plant off your property.
Hi, I'm Paul Pugliese with the University of Georgia Cooperative Extension. Today we're going to take a look at a maple tree in a front yard of a client that actually called me about 6 to 8 months ago complaining that some of the branches in the tree canopy were starting to die out. And so when I got here, I took a look at the tree and noticed that there were some cracks and splits in the bark of the tree that were becoming very obvious. And I realized that this was actually something that I started seeing on a lot of maple trees over the past year, and I've been getting a lot of calls about in the past year. What actually happened to this tree? It's a maple tree. It actually has cold damage, believe it or not. Most people don't think that maple trees would be having any problems with our winter dormancy here, because they can live all the way up into Canada. The problem is not so much the low temperature to any extent. It's the change in temperature and how quickly that occurred. And maple trees sometimes take a little bit longer to acclimate and get completely dormant because of all the sap that they have to move down into that root system. So if they're not fully dormant, that temperature change, that rapid temperature change, can cause some problems with bark splitting and cracking, where that cambium layer, those cells that are right underneath that bark tissue, will actually start to break apart from the cold damage. The other issue that we see too is trees that are planted out in the open, especially that have more of a southern or western exposure on one side of the tree. That side of the tree is going to warm up a lot faster than the other side of the tree. And so that temperature change, that rapid temperature change, especially in the wintertime or even in the summertime, we can see bark splitting and sun scald and other issues, especially on that southern and western side of that tree. Trees that are planted along roadsides tend to be much more susceptible to that because of the temperature differences in the pavement along that roadside. So again, it's all about placement of that tree that's going to make it more susceptible to this type of sun scald and winter damage. Something else to think about is, once this type of damage occurs to a tree, once those bark cracks and splits start to form, there is no treatment for that. We can't fix that problem after the fact. So it's all about prevention. Again, going back to where we place that tree to start with, how we prune it, how we take care of it, making sure that it's not drought stressed, having a good mulch island around that tree. All those things are going to help keep that tree stress-free. But the #1 thing I would want to emphasize is placement. Think about where we plant maple trees. They're more of an understory type tree, or a tree that should be planted more on the edge of a forest. That's where they naturally occur, and they're better adapted to those situations. One other tip I'll mention too is when we fertilize these trees, if you fertilize them, don't ever fertilize them late in the fall. Because again, you're going to have a lot more rapid growth in that tree going into winter dormancy, and that's not good when it's trying to shut down and really needs to be going to sleep for the winter time. So if you have any other questions about your maple trees or trees in general, we encourage you to reach out to an arborist for assistance with treating trees and proper pruning techniques and that sort of thing. So one way you can locate an arborist is to go to the ISA Certified Arborist Directory online at treesaregood.com. And if you have any other questions, reach out to your local county extension office at 1-800-ASK-UGA1 and continue to follow us on the Georgia Farm Monitor.
Paul, thanks so much, and thank you for making this show possible.
Take care, everybody. We'll see you next time right here on the Farm Monitor. Have a great week.